Now, so you also run what you mentioned, you're doing some training and you call it the Intentional Clinician Training Program for Counselors. And what do you mean by that phrase, intentional clinician? Because you also have named your podcast that. So what is this intent? I think you're the intentional clinician as far as I know.
Well, yeah, I'll try to do a short version of this one. Essentially, the name came to me because I was trying to think, this is years ago, maybe 10 years ago. Okay, I want to become this master therapist like Jeffrey Kotler talks about. I want to really get into really being able to help people on a deep level, right? But I was a novice. I was only a couple years into my career at that point. And I felt sort of like a lot of new therapists do in the first 3-4 years of practice. Like, what am I doing? Am I even helping anybody? How, because this is a career where you're putting other people first all the time. And you don't need, the last thing you need is, you don't want them to be validating you. Oh, you did a good job, therapist. That's your codependence coming out. So it's all about the patient. It's not about you, except that you're involved. So you have to work on you. And so I thought, okay, how do you do this? Like, how do you become a better counselor? And I had heard some people who I talked to about this, and they were a little cynical. They're like, oh, you just pick something and figure it out and just do that. And, you stick to something like whatever, pick your school of therapy, behaviorism or humanistic or whatever, and just stick with it. And I just didn't like that. And so I thought, okay, well, if I'm going to get better, I've got to become intentional. So I've got to bring intentionality to my week, which is everything from a small thing to, and it's a struggle. I'm not saying it was easy. Probably I needed it, but essentially I want to create rituals and self-care for myself so that I'm in good shape. There's that. I want to remember the basics of counseling. Why, according to, Scott Miller's research, Bruce Rompold's research, what works in counseling. I want to remember rapport, allegiance, alliance. I remember these things. And then I want to start learning different things from the far neurobiology section to some of the traditional methods like cognitive behavioral therapy. And I want to learn other stuff, deeper stuff, interesting stuff like depth psychology, the Jungian approach. And I want to learn how to weave those together. And I guess maybe Milton Erickson actually kind of inspired a little bit of that, the Erickson Institutes in Phoenix. And he was very eclectic, creative individual. Yeah. And he did a lot of hypnosis work. But, I just went to a lot of trainings and I thought, okay, to become a clinician that feels confident that they can help people by working on themselves and finding, new methods, you have to also be intentionally not confident, which means that I have to remember everything's about what the client brings into you. I can't assume that I know anything. I have to assume that I know nothing. And I always make jokes that I'm wrong 98% of the time, every time I assume anything. So I just, I started writing a training program for new clinicians, kind of where I was at, that I would have liked to have, based on some training programs I went to and some books I read. And it just covers, just a multitude of things from your kind of research sciencey based things and remembering the basics all the way to trying out different kind of almost like the art of therapy, the science over here and the art over here. Yeah. And how do you blend that and how do you use yourself in that? So that's what the training program is about. And I've given it usually once or twice a year in Arizona. I'll do it for continuing education there. And then I was thinking about the name of the podcast. I was like, oh, I'll just call it the Intentional Clinician Podcast because that's what I'm aspiring to be.